I called them the ghost of Coron. Hundreds of men lost their lives in these waters. And what remains? Frozen in time. In September 1944, a squadron of US Navy bombers flew more than 300 kilometers from their carriers in the Philippines to strike a hidden Japanese fleet anchored here. In just one morning, they sank or crippled more than a dozen ships, turning this remote tropical bay into a graveyard of steel. Today, these wrecks rest between 10 and 40 meters deep. What was once death and destruction has become a cradle of life, a living monument to how the ocean turns tragedy into beauty. In this video, I'll take you below the surface to explore some of Coron's most famous wrecks and share the history behind one of the most unique diving experiences in the world. What used to be a theater of war is now a world-class diving destination. I am now in Alfaro, which is a resort located in Busuanga Bay, which is a little bit further than Coron town, much more quiet, less people, and closer to the wrecks, because in 1944 the Japanese fleet thought that they were safe here. Gosh, were they wrong. And 80 years later, you have more than 10 wrecks that you can actually dive in. I will visit around 5 of them, the biggest one, the one that I find the most interesting. So we're gonna learn from it together. And if one day you want to experience this for yourself, I'm also gonna share some tips. Seems like we are being lucky this morning with the weather. I must admit I took a little bit of a gamble by coming early October, which is still kind of the height of the rainy season here in the country. It was actually raining last night, which is why you can see the bay is a little bit brown because of the river and probably some mud coming down the hills. It might affect a little bit the visibility in the bay. I hope not too much. I hope it's gonna be okay. Really looking forward, but it's still a beautiful day. It's definitely a beautiful morning, and if we're lucky, it's gonna stay that way all day. The journey starts with Pirate Divers Busuanga. Their shop is located in the bay, which allows me to get picked up directly at Alfaro, just like other divers staying within the bay area. The closest wreck is only 5 minutes away. We are starting with the Okikawa Maru. In Japanese, Maru stands for circle, carrying the idea of protection. For centuries, this suffix was used for civilian ships. During World War II, the Japanese Navy took over civilian vessels for military transport, keeping their original names. In September 1944, the Okikawa Maru didn't stand much of a chance against the US-held divers performing dive bombing runs over it. The Okikawa Maru now lies between 10 and 26 meters deep, making it a perfect wreck to visit even for open water divers. It is not easy to understand the sheer size of the wrecks available in Coron. Most of them are more than 100 meters long. Okikawa Maru, the longest of them all, is 168 meters long, longer than the football field. It's impossible to get a clear view of the whole boat. As we swim around it, we capture part of its bridge and try to make sense of what we see. As an oil tanker, its primary purpose was to refuel other warships. We can clearly see the areas where the bombs hit, and yet, because of its size, some sections are still in pretty good shape. Over the last 8 decades, nature has taken over. Schools of fish, soft and hard corals, and even turtles have made the Okikawa Maru their home. As we visit the main deck, several entry points are available to explore the inside of this giant of steel. We are now diving deeper, darker. The spaces inside go from tight to wide open, where the dance of torchlights from divers visiting the wreck creates an eerie, almost spooky atmosphere. Visibility inside and around the wrecks is often limited to a few meters, between tides, water flow from the nearby river, and the sediments inside the wrecks being kicked up by divers in tight spaces. It can be challenging to capture clean footage and photos. But what I'm thinking in those moments is, what a unique experience this dive is. From witnessing part of history to seeing how nature has taken over one of the mightiest creations of man, and knowing that other wrecks, equally majestic, are waiting to be visited, I'm really excited for what's to come. Okikawa Maru is often considered one of divers' favorite wrecks in Coron. It's shallower, making it less technical, at least if you stay outside of it, and the huge bridge offers many structures for marine life to use as shelter and for divers to observe and swim through. It is time to slowly go back up, do our safety stop, and get ready to visit our second wreck, Ekkai Maru, also known as Morazan Maru. At first glance, this looks like any other Japanese wreck in Coron, but the Ekkai Maru has one of the strangest stories of them all. She wasn't even Japanese when she was built. Launched in 1908 in Scotland as the SS Manco, later renamed Morazan, she spent decades carrying fruit through the Caribbean for the United Fruit Company. When Japan entered the war, the ship was in an Asian port. The Imperial Navy seized her, renamed her Ekkai Maru, and put her to work hauling equipment and supplies through the Philippines. By September 1944, she lay anchor here in Coron Bay, part of the same fleet hiding from US bombers. That morning, aircraft from Task Force 38 crossed more than 300 kilometers to find this fleet, and within minutes, the sky was filled with explosions. Ekkai Maru took a direct hit and sank in the shallow bay, coming to rest between 12 and 25 meters deep. Today, divers can still see her two boilers, her open cargo holds, and the bridge collapsed over the sand. All blankets in coral and home to schools of fish. She's one of the most accessible wrecks in Coron, a perfect mix of history and marine life. A ship that once carried bananas across the tropics, later captured and destroyed in war, now a peaceful reef resting quietly under the Philippine sun. These wide, layered corals are foliose corals, plate-like structures that stack like giant underwater leaves. They spread across Coron's wreck, transforming steels and shadows into an underwater garden where life can thrive. After a 50 minutes dive, it's time to go back up, rest, and slowly get ready for the third and final dive of the day. But before visiting the last remaining wrecks, let me give you a better sense of the area. When you look at Coron on Google Maps, this is what you'll see. For the sake of the video, let's make it a little bit more entertaining. Busuanga is the main island to the north, Coron Island sits to the southeast, and Culion lies to the southwest. Coron Town is here, while Busuanga Bay, where Alfaro is located, is on the southwestern side of Busuanga Island. And this is where most of the Japanese ships sunk during the Second World War now rest. So if your goal is to spend a few days focusing on visiting as many wrecks as possible, Busuanga Bay is actually a much more convenient location than Coron Town, with shorter boat trips to reach the wrecks. When booking with pirate divers, I actually picked the ultimate wrecked package, which includes 3 days of diving with 3 dives each, so a total of 9 dives, giving divers the opportunity to revisit a wreck that he particularly liked, or if conditions were not ideal on a first dive. For our third wreck, we are visiting Akitsushima. As you may notice, this vessel doesn't have Maru in its name, the only one of all the Japanese wrecks in Coron. That's because Akitsushima was the only true warship in the fleet anchored here, and warships don't receive the Maru suffix. Akitsushima stands for Island of the Dragonfly, a fitting name given its purpose. She was a seaplane tender. Thanks to her crane, she was able to launch, recover and repair reconnaissance aircraft for the Imperial Japanese Navy. Although no aircraft has been found near the wreck, her role was unmistakable. Armed with anti-aircraft guns and machine gun mounts, divers can still see the gun emplacement along the deck. The wreck rests between 22 and 36 meters deep, her hull tilted onto the side, offering a rare opportunity to explore a real Japanese warship from the Second World War. If you want to have a break from diving, which after 3 days of intensive dive is actually quite welcome, you can use one of the kayaks available at Alfaro, and you can visit a seaplane wreck. So it's not underwater, at least it's not anymore. I'm not exactly sure of the history behind it, it's not very clear, because when I asked the locals about how come this plane is here, someone is telling me that it's a plane from World War II. It's connected to the Japanese wrecks, but when I check online, it's not as clear. Upon doing some more research, it appears to be a Grumman HU-16 Albatross, a model built somewhere between 1947 and 1959. So not related to the Second World War, and not very clear what the real story behind it is, but a pretty original site and activity to do in the bay. It starts raining, so we're gonna take cover. Not the plane actually, I hope it's safe, I guess. If it didn't fall all that time. This was clearly underwater for a while, at least this part for sure. Because you have like shell at the bottom. Oh, this is in pretty bad shape. Wow. After this little break, it is time to go back down and keep visiting our remaining wrecks. A few minutes away from the bay, we are getting ready to dive another giant, Kogyo Maru, one of Coron's most interesting wrecks. Built in 1938 in Japan, with a length of 130 meters, it was converted into an auxiliary transport. It became part of the war machine, moving weapons and construction materials across the Pacific. Tried to hide within Coron Bay as part of the same Japanese convoy, but without proper defense, the Kogyo Maru didn't stand much of a chance against the surprise attack from US Task Force 38. Today, the wreck lies on the starboard side between 22 to 36 meters of water. The visibility during our dive was pretty bad. Going through tight spaces to move from one room to another one wasn't for the faint of heart. Spend the next 15 minutes going through the inside of this giant skeleton of steel. For those who never experienced diving through dark and sometimes tight spaces, there is a golden rule of staying calm and composed. I know sometimes I have the tendency to feel claustrophobic when underwater, and this experience definitely made me work on controlling my level of stress. As we are going back outside, the wreck has turned into a reef. Hard and soft corals, sponges and schools of fish using the ship as structure, wrapping life around the hull that was never meant to stay here. And for our final dive, the Tangat Wreck, sometimes called the Olympia Maru, which is a misidentification that tended to stick for a while. The real Olympia Maru was sunk in Manila Bay, nowhere near Coron. The ship we are diving here is now widely known as the Tangat Wreck, named after the island just beside it. With a length of 120 meters, it rests upright in shallow water between 10 and 22 meters deep. It's one of the easiest wrecks to explore in Coron, with big open holes and natural light pouring through. Among the highlights are the never-ending bags of rice still trapped in the hull. Dozens of ladders have become home for soft corals, schools of fish are roaming through the remains, and the entire wreck feels open, bright and accessible. A relatively easy dive, perfect to end this trip on a high note.